Exactly, and he has the most accolades. The most accolades. But Crawford's not too far off. But as far as skill basis, Crawford is the best fighter on the planet.
Listen, we're having a fascinating conversation up here with Max and Mark and Bernardo, but let's bring in the guy who was the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Andre Ward. Dre, your takeaway from what we saw tonight from Terence Crawford?
Well, I'm going to just say this about Sean Porter. You know, man, he's everything that is right for everything that is right for the sport. You know, outside the ring, inside the ring, he approaches the game the right way. Great representative, and I have so much respect for him, and I hope that his legacy is not remembered, or he's not remembered as a guy who took the big ones but couldn't win it, because he's in every fight that he's always taken, and he's done more in terms of his willingness to take these big fights than some guys do in their whole career. So that's the first thing. The post-fight thing with, you know, Kenny Porter, I don't know what that was about. I could have done without that, because I thought Sean looked really good, and I don't know what happened in camp, but Sean looked really good, probably his best that I've ever seen him. He just got caught with a shot, and Kenny Porter did know what was coming, because Terence Crawford is the best finisher in the game. On to the pound-for-pound talk. I never took Terence Crawford off my pound-for-pound list, and part of that is because I've been through these times and these moments as a professional where I'm fighting and I'm cleaning guys out, but maybe there's a certain person they want me to fight, or maybe I had an injury or had some issues with the WBC, and you have lows, and it's very easy for us to forget what a person did or the quality they are because you haven't seen them. I never forgot about what Terence Crawford brought to the table. I looked at, he's fighting the best guys he can fight. He's demolishing all these guys. The last time Terence Crawford had a decision win was maybe 5.5 years ago, and he's calling for the big fights. That should count for something, and tonight he confirmed why.
Max, it is now 9 straight knockout wins as he comes in defense of welterweight title. But I'll let you lead the conversation with Mark and Bernardo as for #1 pound-for-pound.
Well, who do you like? Well, I agree with Dre, but I think that we should separate what Canelo has going for him in this pound-for-pound conversation is economic might. So he can pick and choose. His universe of opportunity is much greater than what
Canelo can fight anyone he wants.
Right.
Anyone he chooses.
And he can also determine, to great respect, the terms. In terms of the eye test, in terms of the skill, in terms of what it's like to download information. And again, I'm with Dre. I thought that Porter was at his best tonight. But in terms of that eye test, I'm with Crawford.
It's very difficult for me because for the longest time I had Crawford above Canelo, and then when he became the undisputed champion, I said, you've got to give him credit for what he did, cleaning out a division in 11 months, and there was no easy touches. He made them look easy, and I think that's a credit to Canelo Alvarez. Now he's going to try to move up to cruiserweight now, and you know, it's a 10-pound difference because of the Bridgerweight division, it's not the full 200 pounds, it's 190, and it goes back to the same criticism that he's always received. Setting terms, making things happen on your terms, and that'll be a detractor for him. But in the end, I'm still going to stick with Canelo, but if there was one guy I had to fight, or didn't want to fight, it's the guy that was in the ring tonight, and that's Terence Crawford.
As I said, it's very difficult to make an argument against Canelo in the moment, I think. By the way, Canelo's skills, when we talk about downloading information and processing it, Canelo is as slick as they come with his upper body movement, defense, offense, off the defense. He has a great chin, like check every box for this guy. He is a complete fighter in his prime and has a great pound-for-pound case because of what Mark mentioned. His economic clout allows him to choose any opponent he wants. Terence is not there yet and may never be there. However, to say that there is a better fighter than Terence Crawford in the world is difficult.
Yes.
I never thought it was Lomachenko. I have a hard time saying it's Canelo now, but you also don't have the evidence, I don't think, to claim Crawford over Canelo. The thing about pound for pound is it's not like getting a title shot. You know, deserving fighters, it needs to be on the resume. This guy deserves the shot. He's the #1 contender because he beat all these guys. Otherwise, he never gets the shot.
But who's the best welterweight?
But Crawford. But pound for pound is not about who deserves it the most or who's. It's about what you think. It's about you watch these guys and you're guessing.
A lot of eye test.
And so if you prefer Crawford, fine. Someone else prefers Canelo, fine. Or Inoue or whomever.
Yep.
But Crawford is certainly one of those guys.
You know what? I prefer the same thing you prefer. Throwback kind of fights. On a night when Sean Porter said he's going to honor Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Boy, that seemed like something we had back in the 80s, didn't it? Four kings, two guys just letting it go. We had great exchanges, we had great intensity, and in the end, we had the great Terrence Crawford acting that way. A 10th round TKO. He moves his mark now to 39-0, 29 knockouts, 9 straight knockouts, and defends his welterweight championship. Back to SportsCenter. We continue on with the state of boxing here with the entire crew. What do you say we dig into the fight a little bit? Anything surprise you early on, Bernardo?
I was surprised at the fact that the effectiveness of Sean Porter early on, because we knew what was going to happen, and yet there was times when Terrence Crawford could not get him off of him. And I believe that in the 5th round, I went over to speak with Brian McIntyre, who is his trainer, and he says, look, I just want him to box more because those openings will come. And eventually, he created those openings. And when they were there in that 10th round and in the 9th round as well, he took advantage of them. And I think that's when you have a great corner and a great preparation, you don't get desperate. You don't allow that to get into your mind and deviate from the game plan, because there was moments where Sean Porter was extremely efficient and he was very effective in what he was doing.
Overhand right, especially the looping right hands.
I think there were a couple fights that, well, first of all, Porter, when he's talking about Hagler, Hearns, war and everything, his aggression was blunted in the first round by Crawford. Even though Porter won the round by a little bit, Crawford was doing things in terms of his movement, positioning, what he threatened to counter with, that blunted that aggression. Now, it is true that he didn't mean blind aggression, and that Porter planned what he did, which is throw him off with his kind of rhythm. As I always talk about with Sean Porter, he brawls when you want to box when you want to engages, disengages. All those things are true, but also his aggression was blunted by Crawford, and it reminded me of 2 different fights. One was Terrence Crawford's coming out party against Gamboa, Yuriorkis Gamboa, who, like Porter, was a little quicker than Terrence, a little more purely athletic if you discount hand-eye coordination, when you talk athleticism and you talk more just fast bursts, fast twitchies. Crawford went to school on him, figured him out, executed the game plan, knocked him out. And the other fight is Holyfield and James Toney. The only guy
we talked about that the other day
ever had an easy time with Holyfield. The only one was James Toney. And I thought the key to this fight is, if you see Crawford placing vicious body shots, he can stop him. That's exactly what he did.
Like a Yongo.
He took over 6, 7, 8, 9 knockout, and it was the body shots.
I thought that the most significant thing he told you was, I was a little stronger than him, Crawford said. And usually, Porter's a football player. And he fights in many instances like a football player. He mauls you, he out-physicals you, and in this sense, Crawford did not allow that to happen. I mean, I thought that Porter had his way in the first part of the fight as Crawford's downloading all that information, but eventually Crawford was stronger than this incredibly strong, durable guy.
All right, Dre and Timmy, what do you say we go through the full highlights of what we saw over the course of 10 rounds between these two? And, what you expected in the first round, you got to Mac's points, maybe not as effective, but Porter did come out with the aggression. You saw the check hook time and again from Terrence Crawford, also slipping in the left uppercut a few times. That was interesting when he went to touch and Terrence just walked away. We're not friends right now.
Not at all. That's how you need to operate. But, the patience was the thing for me. I thought Porter sat on the outside. He moved, laterally. He would, change his rhythms up. He would feint, and then he would come behind whatever Terrence would throw. And that was the jab. That's what he would do. And, when he got inside, he would work his hands. Both hands up and down. And if he had one hand free, he would work that opposite hand. Just to frustrate Terrence, just to get to him on the inside.
There was the clash of heads in the 3rd round, Dre. There was the clash of heads the other way in the 6th round, so both guys had to deal with a cut.
That's to be expected the way Porter fights, but thank God it wasn't too many clash of heads. Porter fought a great fight, man. He fought a great fight. He would sneak attack Terrence Crawford. Terrence was very uncomfortable in spots, especially early in this fight, even midway through the fight. And I felt like a lot of those early rounds went to Porter because Porter would land that 1 or 2 telling punches, or his body language would push Terrence Crawford back, and he landed a couple of grazing bodies, and it just looked like he eked out those rounds. But Terrence Crawford is a competitor. You can't measure that. You can't rate that. You either have that or you don't. You take the instructions your corner tells you, and you have to internalize it and go find a way. And Terrence Crawford found a way now.
That's how it ended. Terrence Crawford. We talked about the body work. The left hand of the body was there all night long. He landed 28 of them. 28.
They were devastating. Those were devastating. Those were the best power shots of the fight.
They were digging. He was digging underneath with that left hand time and again. Let's go through some of the final CompuBox numbers. Then I want to get into the discussion about what we heard from Kenny Porter, who comes up on the apron. You see the reaction from his son. And we understand, obviously, what we heard in the interview. We'll get to that in a second. But there are the total punches. 98 to 79 advantage for Crawford. A lot of that advantage came in the later half of the fight. 65 power punches as Sean Crawford and Team Crawford back dealing with post-fight medicals. So after the fight, Bernardo, you get the chance to speak to Sean and to Kenny. Sean, and they have a wonderful relationship, and they're very open, very honest. If you ever listen to any of the All Access of when they're training, they stop. He listens. He's very direct. He holds him accountable. Holds his son accountable all the time. He said, "My dad's doing what he's supposed to do. We've never directly spoke of it, but you got to understand there's a tacit understanding that if ever you feel like it's going this way, you go ahead and do it." But then Kenny's reaction of saying his son didn't prepare a certain way.
That was the most surprising thing that I heard all night, because I expected him to say, yes, he was hurt. I'm not going to allow my son to be in danger against a guy in Terrence Crawford who is the ultimate finisher in the sport today. So I'm taking care of my son so he can live to fight another day. Those were the words I was expecting to hear from his father and trainer. And Mark, you and I had the conversation before the fight to say, hey, if something were to happen, I actually spoke with Kenny Porter, and he told me that he would be willing to throw in the towel if necessary. But I never expected it to happen because it wasn't that bad. From what we've seen in terms of Sean Porter and his career, what he's been able to come back from, what his character has been, I didn't expect this to be the way it ended.
But I thought, Dre, you nailed it with your analysis of saying, you know what's about to happen, and you know who you're opposite with. And the temple shot's a little different, and he was down on the one knee, but you know exactly where this is going. Let's go back to that soundbite that Bernardo was able to capture.
What prompted you to stop the fight tonight?
Honestly, his preparation. He didn't prepare like I wanted him to prepare. So that's just, that just makes me say, you know what? I don't want him in that situation. He fought a great fighter. The guy's super sharp, and he's at a deficit. It's like fighting this guy blindfolded when you're in a deficit like that. So I wasn't going to let that happen to him.
He looks in great shape, but only you knew what happened in the gym.
I asked him when we met last week, listen, we've seen a lot of bad stuff with fathers and sons. If you find yourself in that position, I got no problem. I will throw in the towel. Now, as harmonious and loving as those two are, I did get this odd sense that it was whose ego was going to win, who is more hard-headed. I guess that came out afterward. But ultimately, the priority with Kenny Porter is what the priority has always been with Kenny Porter, as strange as that ending was, to protect my son.
Listen, I commend Kenny Porter for throwing in the towel if he felt the way that he felt, because oftentimes we're having a different discussion on these platforms talking about why did a father allow his son to take an enormous amount of punishment. So I give him credit for that. Once again, I could have done without the comments after the fight. And again, Kenny Porter can do what he wants to do. That's his son, that's his team, that's their thing. But on the outside looking in, some things are meant to be spoken online and some things are meant to be spoken offline. I just don't think it would, it just wasn't in good taste, because it looks like you're making excuses and you're taking away from Terrence Crawford, but then you're putting Sean Porter out there right after he gets stopped in the biggest fight of his life. I just don't understand the timing of that. I don't understand why he shared that. Kenny is old school, and guys like him, you don't share your business. And that's not something I would think that Kenny Porter would share, especially the first few words out of his mouth in a post-fight interview.
I just think Kenny Porter's just being honest, and he's being honest with the fans, and he's being honest with his son. I don't have a problem with what he did. Honestly, this brought me back to your piece when Kenny lost his brother. It was his responsibility, and it felt like he was inside the ring. He was seeing his son about to get knocked out, and before it can happen, he stepped in and he said enough already. And he knew that he wasn't prepared because he told us he didn't work hard enough. He wasn't disciplined enough during the training camp. So I applaud Kenny for saying what he said, because what that's going to do is that's going to challenge your son mentally. Do you still want to do it? This was the biggest fight of your career, and you weren't listening. You weren't paying attention in camp. You know, you weren't doing the things that you needed to do to be prepared for Crawford.
That's not the way I see it, although I think you can see it from a couple different angles. The way I see it is also, I'd like to refer back to Mark Kriegel's piece. Kenny has a need for control because he felt out of control, and you could read Mark's piece about his little brother being hit by a car and killed when he was 4 and his little brother was 3 years old. And since then, how he feels like he has to control the world for his family. And I think what we saw just then was a sore loser, and a father who has to protect his son's ego because his son will not make excuses, so he'll make the excuses for him. He loves his son, and he's got to protect what must be now a damaged ego. We see this with fighters sometimes, but that is not Sean's style. No. So I guess his dad did it for him, and I think that comes out of his dad organically anyway.
I don't know. He put it on the preparation. I'm kind of with Dre. I don't understand it.
Well, that was Kenny Porter right after the fight with Bernardo. I'm sure an interview that'll be replayed many times in the course of the coming days as Sean Porter suffers the loss. First time he's ever been stopped in his career. You know, the close, razor-thin other losses, competitive fights against the other best welterweights, and Crawford gets the 10th round TKO, and now, you know, we have to put our ballots in for the pound-for-pound list, not to make too much out of it. We got 3 guys at the top, and they're all worthy of the status, but our own Andre Ward knows what it's like.